We were sitting around after the day's work on Friday in the local dive we called our bar. The four of us were listening to Bill Chapman explain again how he had just discovered his wife of 25 years had had an affair a while back. The other three had offered him their support and pointed out repeatedly the cost of a divorce if he decided to go that route. The four of them had been lifelong friends, and I had been invited into their group shortly after I had arrived in their small town. All five of us had served in the Marines. I had come to the town of Spuzzum on the coast after throwing a dart at map on the wall over 10 years ago. Upon my arrival, using a newly formed offshore LLC, I had bought out the only grocery store for miles and had expanded it. Spuzzum back then was a logging town with a village population around 1,000. The nearest town was more than a half-hour away. Within a year, I had built up the business, got it licensed to carry alcoholic beverages, and had tripled its size. The gas bar came later. The store carried all the basics. I now had 8 full-time staff and 6 part-time. It took me a year before starting to build a log home on a section of land I had bought from a tax sale on the outskirts of town. My 4 friends had spent hours helping me to design it. Thanks to the fact that they all worked at the mill, I had been able to buy the raw logs debarked directly at wholesale prices, saving myself a ton of money. As a result, I now had a 3-bedroom, 3,800 square foot, 2-level log home that overlooked the village and the coast. The only problem they had with me was the fact that as far as they knew, I had never married, and since my arrival, I had never dated. The rumor mill labeled me as a clothes closet man's man, although no one had ever seen me make a pass at anyone. The woman folk respected me, but soon learned I was a bachelor and would remain as such. I was someone that all could trust, and they did. Everybody had a lot of questions about me, but soon learned that I was a very private man who would not disclose much about my past. I had set up the LLC so that the company paid all the taxes. Anything I took out for personal use came out of retained equity, so when I filed my personal taxes, it showed no income. I paid for everything in cash or by debit card. I did not even own a personal credit card. The only different thing is that I now went by my second name instead of using my first. The sign at the entrance to our village said, "Next stop Japan." No one knew I had come from the state of New York to off the Washington coast because of what had happened in my past. I often wondered what kind of idiot would name a place Spuzzum. After the second beer, we broke it up because Bill's eldest son was arriving home from university that night, bringing with him his fiancée. Bill's wife had gone to Seattle to pick them up. We were all invited over for a barbecue on Saturday to celebrate his graduation and engagement. Bill wanted to be sober and waiting when they got there. After all, he did not want his future daughter-in-law getting the idea when he met her that he was nothing but the town drunk. Stephen had been hired by one of the biggest investment firms in New York, so we all knew just how proud Bill was. I was the last to arrive as usual, afraid once again that one of my friends' wives would have brought someone along in their ongoing attempts to set me up. They treated it as a game because they were dying to know whether I was straight or not. Their not knowing only fueled their curiosity. So, I tended to be the last to arrive and the first to leave. Connie, Bill's wife, saw me drive up in my old 1940 restored Ford truck. I considered it my pride and joy. "You got to meet Stephen's girlfriend, who's a redhead," she said. "Jennifer is 22 years old, has 2 sisters and 3 brothers. I fell in love with her the moment I met her. One look at her makes it clear that she's someone you want to know. I've learned already that she has a heart of gold. I wanted to warn you because we both know that when you see a redhead, you get quiet, distant, and sad. I have often wondered if it was a redhead that scared you in the past. I don't know, because you won't open about anything. Grab a cold beer before joining us in the backyard." After grabbing a cold bud, I headed out to their backyard to discover that the whole crew was there with all their kids and a few extra. Stephen saw me and ran over to give me a big hug. After thanking me again for the 100th time for covering the cost of his education, he led me into the crowd so he could introduce his girlfriend to me. When he called her Jennifer, turned towards me, my face went pure white. I became stiff and tense. I looked like I was seeing a ghost. My first inclination was to run. The path of the walk-in life forced upon me was about to be exposed. I wasn't sure if I could stay to face it. Jennifer was in all ways a mini version of her mother. Jennifer was one of a set of identical triplets. The last time had seen her was the morning of the day I had caught her mother and my brother in our master bed, making out like 2 dogs in heat. I was so nervous I couldn't speak. She, like her mother, was a natural redhead with a body that oozed her sexuality. At 5'6", she was smoking hot and had the curves in all the right spots. Like her mother, the shape of her butt and hips was her greatest asset. Too much looking at her could cause a man to walk around with a permanent hard-on. When she saw me standing there, her baby blue eyes lit up as if they were inflamed. Immediately, her tears started to flow, but it was the biggest smile coming from her face that informed me they were ones of extreme joy. I was on the verge of losing it big time because the pain, the grief, and loss was staring me in the face. Seeing her as a beautiful adult, that warm smile made me realize once again just how much of my children's life I had been forced to miss. "Oh my God, I don't believe it." Jennifer screamed through her sobs while expressing her emotional joy as she rushed towards me. "You're alive. I knew it. My heart never would allow me to believe that you were dead. We were all told by the family that you were dead, and no matter how hard they tried to convince me, I would not accept it." The silence became so loud that we could hear the breeze. Everyone had the look of shock on their faces. No one had a clue what to say. They had to be wondering what this was about as Jennifer rushed into my arms. Everyone was dealing with a bit of shock and awe. Stephen, breaking it, said, "You know Charlie Howe?" Charles' full name is Jonathan Charles Barnes III. Jennifer said between her sobs. "I know because he's my dad. I would recognize his face anywhere." The family has always explained that he committed suicide because of economic problems, but I knew in my gut that something did not seem right. When we asked about him, my Uncle James, my step-father, always got very quiet. He only did that when he had something to hide. As we grew up, we discovered it was his way of not admitting or facing the truth. I wrapped my arms around her frame, squeezing her tight as she buried her face into my neck. The tears flowed from both of us. It had been 15 years since I had held one of my daughters like this. At that time, she had been 7 years old. At that moment, the love I had held hidden for so long exploded. Our emotions let go. Everyone heard our sobs. Knowing everyone was expecting an explanation, I thought my words over carefully while trying to calm us both down. I have to say it took us both a few. I was banished by my family so they could keep their lies and secrets hidden. To them at that time, it was very important to keep the family name, its public political image, and honor beyond reproach. I was forced against my wishes to sign a non-disclosure agreement and disappear. This came about because earlier I had walked into my home to discover my older brother making love to my wife, who was Jennifer's mother. I had just returned unexpectedly that day after dropping the girls off at school because I had forgotten my briefcase, which contained files I needed. I watched him possess and claim his ownership of my wife before I left. I explained. My brother and my wife never knew I was there until the very end of their making out. I captured their loving making in a video with my cell before I confronted them. They laughed about me catching them as if it was nothing. In tears, I walked out. They showed no guilt or remorse. After showing my video of them to the judge, my grandfather, her family, and mine decided they needed to clean up the mess so that they all could protect their important political careers. It was also done so that my brother, the chosen one, could marry my wife. I said through tears, marrying a widow woman with 3 daughters would be an added plus for him in his political run. Time has proven that it was. For over 15 years, to those who know the family truth, including her mother, I have been the walking dead. Now I am just Charlie Barnes, nothing more, nothing less. If fate had not stepped in, no one would have known the truth. I said sternly. In my wildest dreams, I never saw the truth coming out. Everyone was stunned. A few looked like they were going to throw up. I noticed that Connie was looking down towards the ground, trying to hide her own shame. I could see that she was trying to hide her flowing tears. She was beginning to comprehend for the first time the consequences of her own conduct from the eyes of another. Little did she realize that once the genie was let out of its bottle, nothing would ever be the same. No one, unless they had gone through the struggle and separation, would someone understand the hidden pain. Holding my daughter in my arms for the first time in years made me face the consequences of unintentional consequences of a family's hidden truths. At that moment, I felt ashamed. It was then that my tears once again started to flow. For me and my daughter, our mutual healing had begun. There were only 2 things that meant anything in life, according to my grandfather. That was money and power. The rest was just plain bullshit. He had both. My first mistake was that had I went to talk to him after catching my wife and my brother, I was emotionally distraught. At that time, the judge was being considered for the Supreme Court, and a scandal would have ruined any chance he had. By the time I had finished telling him what I had discovered, he had already begun scheming with his legal mind to resolve it in such a way that the events would never see daylight. He watched the video, and to the end of his life, I have never heard him curse so much. His first phone call was to my wife's Joan's father, a senator from Maine. He explained to Raymond Thompson what I had caught and recorded. I texted him the video file. Joan's father's anger made it clear he was not impressed. He said he would catch a private jet out. They both agreed that nothing would be done until the three of us talked it all out. Before making the next call, he turned on a program that would record the conversation he was about to make. With a cold look of sternness, he called my wife. Listening to a one side of a conversation where the names bitch, 304, and other degrading name you could think of would have seemed comical if I had not thought of using them myself. He came down on her with the weight of a ton of bricks, making it clear that she and my idiot brother had been acting like immature teenagers. If this gets out, your father's career is over, and so is mine. None of this would be happening, Joan, if you had learned how to keep your legs crossed. It would not have been a problem, but James's family and the mass media will eat it up. My grandfather said the reporters will be claiming incest on the front page. Putting his finger over his lips to signal for me to be quiet, he put the phone on speaker, then asked Joan if her 3 daughters were actually mine. She said yes. My grandfather said, "Well, how do you know for sure? Perhaps since you have proven yourself to be nothing but another man's 304, we should have blood tests done to make sure." Joan became animated. In anger, she responded that the affair with James did not start until 3 years ago, making it clear that there had been no others. The judge said, "Why should anyone believe anything you say?" She pointed out that she was on the pill because she did not want more children. So as far as we know, James may not have been the only lover you had on the side. My grandfather then asked, "Do you love John?" She said, "Yes, I have always loved him, but it has now changed. I used to love him the way a woman should love her husband, but now it's more like a sister who loves her brother." Those words ripped my heart out. The judge could see my pain. It was as if she had stabbed me in the heart. The judge, now in a rage, witnessed my pain and tears. Joan said, "I guess James and I are at fault for that. If I have worked as hard at the marriage as John did, this would never have happened. James saw my sexual attraction for him before John and I married, and deliberately pursued me after he moved in." Joan went on to explain that they had allowed their physical attraction towards each other to lead them. It overboiled, and I finally ended up giving in to his constant attention, with Jim staying with us as he began to start his civilian life while John was on his many business trips. Our desires drove us to where we are now. At first, it was strictly physical. We did not realize it until it was too late that we had fallen in love. By then, we did not want to have it ended. We were satisfied in keeping it hidden from his brother. We didn't think it out. I believe it was not our intention to hurt John. We had not decided what we were going to do until John caught us. Sadly, I could tell from the sound of her voice she had no guilt or remorse. There was nothing, not even a little regret. She was not even ashamed that they had been caught. My grandfather saw the tears running down my cheek. Their destroying of my world was now complete. My grandfather then asked, "Do you love James again, just to verify?" Joan said yes. After John caught us, he walked out. James asked me to become his wife, and I agreed. My grandfather replied, "So James has taken away from his younger brother his wife, children, and his life. What kind of man could do that to his younger brother? What kind of woman would allow that to happen? How could either of you do that to another human being? Do you think John deserved this? Bitch." Joan said, "We won't deny John his right to see the kids when our schedule allows it, because James is planning a run for political office. So, whatever we end up doing, it has to be handled quietly and delicately. Publicly, James will have to become their new father. John will be the distant uncle. As you well know, the courts are still reluctant to give sole custody to the father." My grandfather then said, "I guess the only thing I have left to say to James, or you, are that after we have resolved this matter, I never want to hear from either one of you again. In my eyes, both James and you are dead." He then slammed the phone down in anger. I had never seen him that mad. Looking at me after being silent for quite a few, my grandfather said, "Remember the hurt, the pain, and your loss. They have, for all intention, have made it very clear that you have been written out of their and your own children's lives. It would be better for all right now if you were dead, because that's how they view you. What they flush down the toilet means more to them than you. Do you think they set themselves up deliberately to get caught? From my eyes, it sure looks like they did. If that is true, then that is cold. The day will come when your chance at revenge will come. When it does, show them no mercy. Take no prisoners, but leave them ruined and alive. Remember, dogs always return to their own vomit. Damn it. I would not have believed it, but she is truly a conniving dirty bitch. She should have become a politician. I wish it was legal to kill, because I would kill your brother myself. With that, my grandfather drove his fist into the wall, breaking his hand. Remember, Jennifer, it was never my choice. The two families decided it would be best for all after listening to the phone call your mother had with the judge. Joan and James had put both sides of the family's careers and lifestyle on the line. I understood that they had to be protected too, I said while still holding her in my arms. I can play that conversation to you later. That will explain a lot of things, but right now we need to calm down and enjoy the rest of this special day. Jennifer lifted her head off my shoulder, kissed me, then as she separated herself from me, she took my hand. Turning to her future husband, she said, "Stephen, my love, thank you for bringing me here. It brought my father back into my life. Dad, don't leave before talking to me, okay?" Kissing her tenderly on the cheek, I agreed. With that over, the barbecue was back on. After gulping the rest of the bud down, I let out a big burp. Everybody roared. I heard Jennifer comment, "Now that's the dad I know. He used to recite the whole alphabet in a long big burp." Bill and I headed back to get a couple of cold ones. Jennifer was never away from Stephen, but the whole time I was there, her eyes were always on me. "You amaze me," Bill said. "Here I am crying in my beer last night because of my wife admitting she got chased, caught, and slipped. Hell, she even admitted she didn't love the a-hole. You sat there not saying a word. Now I understand why. What you went through makes me feel that what I am dealing with is nothing but toast crumbs. It's given me a whole new point of view. How you handled it I will never understand, but I now see why you walk alone. Are you willing now to give me some advice?" I laughed and replied, "Make Connie go through marriage counseling with you. Tell her you need to understand what led her to doing what she did before you can fully forgive her. Each session will reinforce in her own mind the shame and guilt she is experiencing." I noticed it when I explained why I hadn't seen Jennifer in so long. "Connie still loves you, that's why she feels her guilt so much. It will be a time period that will allow both of you to bring this situation to a closure where the healing and forgiveness will last." "Oh, I approve of your son's choice for a wife." That made us both roar, and we returned to join the party. We had all pretty much cleaned up everything that Bill and Connie had prepared when Bill stood up with Connie standing at his side, getting everyone's attention. Most of you don't know this, but our son Stephen graduated debt-free thanks to a private scholarship provided by our good friend and my son's future father-in-law, Charlie. Jennifer, welcome to the family. If you have half the character and wisdom your father has, my son is definitely a blessed man," Bill said. Connie said, "To my new daughter and my son, remember, always in your journey as man and wife, that you're only human. At times there will be situations caused by the other that you feel can't overcome." Bill and I had thought we had reached that point, but we found some very wise advice. As a result, we will be seeking some outside professional help. Remember, it's easy to say I'm sorry, but not so easy to get over something if you don't understand why it happened. Never let your pride get in the way in your marriage. Everyone said that they agreed, then proposed another toast for them. Later, as I was making the rounds to say goodbye, Connie came over to me and planted a kiss on my cheek, then whispered, "Thank you for getting my husband to give us a second chance. We will be seeking counseling to try to work it out. My family owes you big time." I looked around for Jennifer, but she was nowhere to be seen. So, I entered the house to head to the front door when I noticed the 2 suitcases by the front door. "I hope you're not leaving without me, Dad," my daughter said. "Steve agrees with me that since we are home that I should stay with you. It will give us a chance to get to know each other again. After all, we both expect my real father to be the one that walks me down the aisle." I lost it again. It was a hoot watching her drive the old Ford home. She had never driven a Standard in her life. I just watched while mentally figuring out the cost for a new transmission because she kept using the clutch as a brake and inexperience caused her to grind the gears. The double S-curve gravel driveway up the hill to my house blew her mind. She stalled out at least 5 times. It made me laugh, yet it was a simple memory I would treasure the rest of my life. As soon as we got into my home, I started up the wood stove to take the evening chill off the place, then gave her a royal tour after planting her suitcases in what was now going to be her room. By the time we had done the tour, she was in love with my log home. Each of the bedrooms were designed like they were all master bedrooms, each having their own bathrooms. The open kitchen, with a pantry off to the side, open floor dining room and living room made the space appear huge, leaving the office room half bathroom and stairs at the very end. We had left the office or computer room to the last, so I could let her play the conversation my grandfather had recorded so many years ago. After listening to it, she asked if she could get a copy of it. So I copied it to a stick and gave it to her. I also copied the video of them making love. She noticed that the files were originally made 2 days before my reported death. I left her there crying, grieving, knowing she was experiencing the gambit of emotion from love right through to hate. The raw truth of hearing the voice of someone you love with their own mouth, proving everything they had told you in your life was nothing but lies, had to destroy one's trust and faith. I had gone into the kitchen, poured us each a glass of wine, and was sitting on the couch facing the window watching the village lights below when she finally came out to join me. I could notice the puffiness of her tear-swollen eyes. She sat down beside me, so I took her and held her in my arms, holding her, not saying a word. The glasses were almost empty before my daughter spoke. All my life, I have been told they drew closer as they grieved your death until they realized they had fallen in love, and then they got married. It was the biggest wedding that year in the state, Jennifer said. My own mother's voice proves everything they said about it all was nothing but a lie. I still am having difficulty understanding the coldness of both towards you. I ask myself if it was done out of hate. Mother claimed she loved you till you died. It is forcing me to wonder if anything they said to us was true. It's going to take time for you to work it out. Hell, I still don't understand it all. Even worse, there may not be an acceptable answer as to why. I replied, their marriage may not even be legal. If that comes out, James' re-election bid to the Senate will go down. I have got a copy of the non-disclosure agreement I had to sign with the judge and your mother's father. It details what I had to do and why it had to be done. I will give you a copy before you leave. They stole your children from you and changed our lives in ways we will never know.
Yen replied,
It's like they were acting as if they were gods. The one thing I don't understand is why you let them. First of all, they had made me a cuck. My grandfather believed till his dying day that they had it all planned. They counted on the fact that the rest of the family on both sides had too much to lose and would do anything to cover it up. Their family's own long-term conduct proved them right. So, for your mother and my brother, there was no downside. As a result, they got to keep everything. My former business lost a lot of its reserved cash. My ex took the corporation public and converted my equity into shares to raise now needed capital. Out of sight, out of mind as far as the public was sought. Both. The judge and your mother's father transferred offshore money into a new LLC set up for me in my name, only to help me restart my life far away. I explained. Joan and James knew the family with enough money could find a way to make everything disappear. They banked on that fact. Time proves that they counted on it. So now everything I do now is done through the LLC, so I have no personal income to declare. This was done to make it harder for anyone to trace me. The international corporation is in a tax-free haven, and every cent I draw comes from retained earnings. My computer room is where I manage the LLC's many investments, which have done very well. I explained. My grandfather told me the day would come when the truth would come out, but I had to promise him that I would wait until it did. Only then would I become free. He said it would be the truth of what happened that would take the two of them down. Now with you knowing, when I walk you down the aisle, many will see my face. There is no way they can hide it. Their past will begin to unwind. It will become a very public scandal. The business here gives me the appearance of having a normal life. I stated, our wedding is set for the 6th of August. They have already rented the hall, booked, the church sent out the invitations. Grandfather Barnes was to walk me down the aisle, but when he hears about our conversation, he will gladly give up his spot for you. Jen said, with my connections back home in the mass media, I want to have the information on the stick released the last Sunday before my wedding and have the search for your death certificate begin. I want those two to pay for what they have done. Do I have your permission to tell your father that you're alive when the conversation is finally released? So why didn't you remarry and build a new life? Yes, you can tell my dad, although I believe he might already know that I am still alive. The answer to the second question is quite simple. Your mother and I have not gotten a divorce. I replied. I may not be legally dead, so I was not free to remarry. In my heart, I could not deliberately allow my wants and needs to hurt another. The price I had to pay was to lead a single life. The morals, principles, and standards I have would not allow me to be like them. I told her. It had finally sunk in because Jen's face showed the element of surprise for the first time in her life. She saw the difference between her mother, my brother, and me. It had to register in her mind that the difference was like night and day. Dad, you have been imprisoned. They stripped you of your life and your children. They made it impossible for you to have a new family. You were put in a box and forced to play their games by their rules. You are free, but it's restricted just the same. Does that make sense? Jen asked. Yes, it does, but that it was also my mistake because I could have refused to go along. I replied. Instead, I decided to put the needs of the whole two families first. I left her, walked back into the computer room, and pulled down a huge binder from the shelving built into the wall. Returning to her, I placed the binder in front of her and told her to start to look while I refilled our glasses. Jen was amazed. It was a binder book filled with all her life memories. Every announcement, every public appearance, every play she played, and copies of her report cards. I had captured everything I could in her walk of life. I had got it all. She was surprised of how much she had forgotten. We talked into the wee hours of the morning as she shared her thoughts on those memories I had never shared. She went to bed with the knowledge that she had always been loved by me. I told her that I had a binder just as full for each of her sisters that I hoped one day I would be able to share with them. She stayed for 2 weeks, spending her time with Steven's family and me. By the time she left, we were closer than we'd ever been. I felt blessed to have her back in my life. On the last Friday of July, the order went out for me to buy short the stock of the company I had formerly owned. Its current value was $129 a share. I was gambling with my future. By the end of the day, I owned over 1 million shares. Jennifer's mother was the current CEO. All my original shares should be in my trust for my children until they reached the age of 25. That was the way it had been set up, but it could have been changed. When I had left 15 years ago, they had estimated the value of the company to have a market value of about $45 a share. Bill, Connie, and I would be flying out the following Thursday via a private jet I had booked. Jennifer had kept her vow of secrecy, but called me daily to keep me informed as to what was going on using Steven's phone. My stockbroker had been informed to continue to buy shares each day until the 5th of August and only sell the shares that were bought at the highest value to cover the margins needed on that market day. The conversation between the former deceased judge and my wife hit the airwaves Sunday morning, along with the video of Joan giving up her body and soul to my brother. An online adult website crashed because the video became that hot. The Democratic media sucked it up big time. By the end of the day, there was an all-out search for my death certificate, a record of divorce, and any related documentation concerning the settlement of my estate. Questions were raised about how I was supposed to have died. Had I been murdered? It was 7 o'clock on the West Coast when my daughter called 11 p.m. in New York. She thought the news coverage was a blast. Her mother and stepfather were in panic mode. Jennifer's sisters Judy and Joe and had been trying to get clarification from their mother about it all. Joan or James was refusing to answer any of their questions. One of the questions they asked was, "Is our father still alive?" Jen then said the second bombshell would be released overnight. Those who had it read it said it appeared that I was made by the family with James and Joan's Barnes' direction to have been forced to disappear. The accounts the funds the family promised me appeared to have been sent to had never existed, adding speculation that I had been set up to be killed. She then said she was going to call my father into his office and hand him the cell. I could hear his office door close as my father said hello. I responded, "Hello, Dad." "John, is that really you?" he asked quietly. "How are you, son?" "Yes, it is. I'm good. Jen can fill you in. How is Mom? How much do you know?" I replied, "We learned about the whole mess about a week after the release of the story of your suicide and why they felt it was necessary. We're a bit older, but we're both quite healthy, all things considering. You will be proud to see how well your daughters have turned out. But tell me how Jin figured it out, my dad asked. She found me by accident. It turns out her intended is the son of a good friend. His family threw a barbecue to introduce her and to celebrate his graduation from university. When Stephen took me over to her when she turned to face me, she recognized me right away. We have been in contact ever since. I said, I need to remain hidden until the wedding, so I'm flying in Thursday night with the groom's parents and family. Do you think I can remain safely hidden if I get a helicopter to drop me off at your estate? I'll make sure the landing pad has the lights on, and we will give the staff an extra few paid days off. Your mom will be thrilled to cook the two of us a few meals. Just let Jin know your time of arrival, my dad said. After a few words, he let me know he wasn't going to tell my mom. He wanted it to be a complete surprise. Early Monday morning in the European markets, according to FBN, share values of my former company had dropped over $20. On Monday morning, just at opening, I picked up another million shares for $101 each, buying them short. That afternoon, after watching values continuing to drop, I put in a buy order of 4 million shares at $45 a share, trying to get it to bottom out and to sell off all the shares I currently owned at $65 a share. The mass media hysteria with CNN taking the lead were destroying James and Joan Barnes and taking down anything associated with them. Incest, possible murder, and the making of a cuck ruled the printed page. James Barnes, being a Republican, allowed CNN's Anderson Cooper to rant and rave like a lunatic, milking it for all it was worth. CNN's ratings were huge. They had a huge crowd of reporters parked at their front gates. Based on what the mass media had proved, the FBI announced an investigation into my disappearance. On Thursday morning, my former corporation announced that their CEO, Joan Barnes, had accepted a buyout. Everyone knew she had been forced out. Her association with the corporation was destroying them. The stock share value began to stabilize at $35 a share. On Friday afternoon, the stock began to climb, but the personal problems for my brother James Barnes began to evolve. He was now facing a Senate ethics investigation. There were calls hourly within the Senate and the mass media for him to resign. In his only public appearance, he restated the story that Joan and he had become involved seriously only after my reported suicide, and that the conversation between the former judge and his wife had to have been manufactured. The video of them making out had to have been created later. CNN announced they were going to do a voice audit to see if the voices of both parties on the conversation could be verified. They uncovered tape of James publicly announcing that I had committed suicide and brought out the point that to date no death certificate had been found. On Friday, Joan's father announced his sudden retirement from the Senate due to ongoing health problems. His daughter's own long-term conduct had taken him down. For him, it had gotten hot. The shares of my former company closed on Friday at $59. My purchase of the shares at under $45 had been confirmed. At dusk on Thursday night, the helicopter began its descent. As it lowered itself down, I could see my parents walking out of the back of their house to greet me. After the pilot shut down, I got out underneath the twirling blades and picked up the suitcases he had got out. As soon as I cleared the rotating blades, I straightened up, allowing my mother to see my face. My dad had to hold her as the tears and shock buckled her knees. It had been over 15 years since I had seen their faces. Mom kept crying, "My baby has come home." She spent the next 2 days acting like an overprotecting mother hen while trying to fatten me up because to her I looked so lean. Home-cooked meals never tasted so good. At 5 minutes to 2 on Saturday, Jennifer stepped out of the door of the church, which signaled for me to leave the limo. As I walked up the steps towards her, a CNN reporter caught me on live camera and asked me who I was. I turned and said with a straight face, "I'm the Walking Dead." I then walked up to stand beside the bride. Jennifer looked stunning. After giving each other kisses on the cheek, we walked in arm, each one of our faces showing our pride. The cameraman had captured it all. I caught Joan's image from the backside, and man, her bum still looked good as she led the bridal party down the aisle to the front. She didn't look half bad from behind. She still had a bum a man would die for. Next came the ring bearers and the flower girls, who made sure to drop rose petals as they walked. Joan was next, and Judy was just ahead of us. I told Jennifer to relax, which caused Judy to look back. I raised my index finger to my mouth, letting her know to remain quiet. Judy mouthed to her sister, "You found Dad," fighting the tears that wanted to flow just before entering the main area of the church. Jennifer just nodded her head, her face shining in joy. Looking up towards Stephen, I noticed that everyone had to be asking themselves, where was the best man? Little did they know he was walking his bride down the aisle. I watched Joan take her seat beside a man I assumed must be James. If it was, time had really changed him. He now had the typical dad body with a bald spot on his head. Both Jennifer and I watched Joanne ascend the steps, taking her place, then turning towards us. As the tears started flowing, she put her hand over her mouth to hold in her screams. It was almost as if she believed I could not be real. Then Judy stood beside her, holding her hand while whispering in her ear. She too joined her sister in shedding her tears. I let go of my daughter and watched her climb the steps until she stood beside Stephen. "Who gives this lady away?" the father said. I said, "Her mother and I do." Then I went and stood beside Stephen's side. It was a beautiful ceremony. Many would say it was the most emotional ceremony they had ever seen because the tears of joy flowed from my 3 daughters' face. I could not help noticing that my daughter's mother and my brother faces were completely white. Neither one of them could look me in the eyes. During the whole ceremony, their eyes were looking down. Over the evening festivities, I got asked numerous times how I had come to be my son-in-law's best man. Had I introduced the two? When we signed the form for registration for the marriage certificate, the Catholic father was shocked when I signed my formal name. Almost all the witnesses of this marriage who had known about me now knew that I was alive. Though nothing was said, I could tell that cell phones were being used all over the place. We would later learn there had been 3 live feeds. The judge and the senator by the end of that day had set the plans into play. Both saw the situation as a mess that would scandalize the 2 families in every way. Having served in the Marines until just after the birth of the triplets, it was decided I would get called back in. So, for over 3 years, I was hidden in plain sight fighting the Taliban with brothers in arms. There wasn't a mission that I would not volunteer for. They said I had been driven. I got the reputation of being very hardcore. But it was a faulty set of body armor that finally did that in. As a result, I had 8 bullet scars across the front of my chest. I had barely escaped with my life. After getting my discharge papers, I was a major no more. I had gone to the Cayman Islands to reorganize my accounts before deciding what to do with the rest of my life. The judge and my grandmother had met me there on the family estate. It was my grandmother's idea that if I could not figure out what to do, I should make it a chance of discovery by throwing a dart on a map and see where it led. That stupid suggestion had brought me here. The congratulatory line was a hoot. Judy and Joan stood on each side of me. They milked the introducing of me to everyone for all it was worth. Pride was glowing from their faces. Yet I did not feel comfortable in a tux. Joan and James were the last to pass through. Stephen was polite, but Joan wasn't because she appeared to be in total shock. "Mother," Jennifer said, "you should know Dad did not find me, I found him. It was me who had all the information about what you both did released. Dad reluctantly allowed me copies of it, so I could prove to my sisters what truly had happened. He had no clue to what I was doing. What James and you did to all of us is unforgivable. I decided it had to be set straight. I had to prove he was not the failure you both made him out to be." Joan was furious. Her anger made her want to scream, but held her tongue and walked away without saying a word to me. Joan was asking herself, is my daughter trying to destroy my life? James stood for a few, looking at me before saying anything. "We need to talk. We need to work this out, John," James said softly, looking at me while trying to figure me out. "Working on that as we speak. But you know, I was there listening via speaker when the judge and Joan talked," I replied without offering my hand. James looked at me in shock as if he had no clue. "I will show you both as much consideration as you both showed me," which we all know was none. "You made your bed, now live with it," I said with a stone-cold voice. "I'll enjoy watching the fallout." We stood there watching the couple as they headed out the door. My 3 daughters saw a big smile on my face. Steve said, "Oh, something's up." I just laughed, knowing that as soon as they got off the church steps, the 2 of them would be served. Joan was being served for divorce on the grounds of adultery. James for alienation of affection. It would be captured by the mass media again. The nightmare for them was going to get a lot worse. It was time for us to get to the park for the pictures for their wedding albums, so we, the bridal party, climbed into a big limo. On the way over, while sharing a glass of champagne, Jennifer explained everything to her two sisters who were holding onto me tight. They were surprised to learn that Jen had stayed with me for 2 weeks while she got to know her in-laws. My 3 daughters had grown up to be very beautiful ladies. They made me proud. Jen explained how we had gone through all the things I had collected about her throughout the years. Jen said she got the impression that I knew more about her than she remembered about herself. Then she said he has one on each of you just as thick. It proved to me Jen said that he never stopped loving us. The only awkward moment during the photo shoot was the one with all the parents. All 5 of us. We got around it by having Connie and Bill between the rest of us, and the fact that they could not get 3 of us to smile. James and Joan were not in a good mood. Their world was collapsing fast. My identity was now out, and the mass media was having a field day. The Walking Dead was alive. Became the mass media cry. Everything they thought they knew was being rehashed. Like the Democratic media always did, everything was being taken to the extreme. The bridal dinner was over the top, then it came for the toast. As the best man and father of the bride, I threaded it with tact. I explained it honestly, telling how thanks to his good parents, who I considered best friends, we had developed a close bond, and that I saw him as the son I never had. I went on to explain some of the comical situations we put ourselves in and how they had drawn us closer. I admitted that I was taken by complete surprise when he introduced me to his bride. I finished it off by saying I hoped they had the wisdom to catch on to and hold on to all their dreams. My mother's face glowed with pride. When Stephen stood up, I almost lost it. He started out by saying it's rare that a groom can say that his father-in-law is his best friend. Jennifer's father paid for my post-secondary education and has advised through a lot of rough times. It was a shock to us all that day in June when I discovered that John was Jennifer's real dad. I'll never forget my own father's words when he said I had to be a blessed man to have Jennifer becoming my wife. To both of my fathers, I want to say thank you for making me the man I am. When the bride and groom started their dance, they owned the room. To this day, I have never seen a more beautiful bride. Judy and Joe, and kept me on the dance floor, both wanting to share as much time with me as possible. Outside of my mother, they controlled all my time. The master of ceremonies came out on stage to announce it was time for the bride and her father to dance. Before we do that, with the bride and groom's approval, I would like to give General David Bloomberg the mic. The general stepped forward. He said he was here to give 3 medals to Hard Hat Charlie. I had to laugh. Hard Hat Charlie was a major in charge of a platoon of SEALs, he said. They had gone into a mission that is still classified today, only to learn upon arrival it had been an enemy's trap. Our intelligence of the situation had been totally wrong. The 2 platoons sent with them were also trapped. They were surrounded. Foreman, when under review of the botched mission, said it was like a modern-day Custer's last stand. After 2 days of heavy fighting with our forces near exhaustion, word came down the line to load up their bazookas to the max and pass them down the line. An average Marine can carry one of them with all their gear. Hard Hat Charlie had taken off all his clothing and gear. He had nothing on but his bulletproof vest, his helmet, boots, and his underwear. Everybody roared. Everyone around him told him he was crazy, but he said to his second in command, "Win or lose, if we don't gamble, we are all going to die. Since to all I love I am already the Walking Dead, at least I will die with my boots on. I must give my men a fighting chance." He loaded up his body with 2 of these bazookas after throwing a bunch into a clearing. He put his helmet on, stuck a cigar in his mouth, stood up, and moved into a clearing and let those babies rip. His first hit was on an ammo reserve, which caused multiple explosions to spread everywhere, sending the well-hidden enemy scrambling. After firing a few more shells, he turned around and ripped out a few more shells into pre-selected sites up the hillside. He was hit 23 times while still firing before he went down, but only 8 of them were serious. The enemy's back, because of his action, was broken. They ran like the dogs they were. Each man who served with him to this day swears he alone saved all their lives. So, I am here to present 2 Purple Hearts and 1 Silver Star to Major Jonathan Charles Barnes III. My only regret is that I could not do it in front of his men. I walked up and the general pinned them on, then saluted me. My parents and 3 daughters were very proud. My daughter Jen finally led me to the floor for the father-daughter dance. She had chosen an old 60s song, Your Daddy's Home. It was a very emotional dance for the 2 of us. When they announced the son and mother dance, I went over and got my mother joining Stephen and Connie on the floor. You could clearly see how much it meant to her. It was written all over her face. Later, the bride and groom disappeared to change into their going-away outfits, and when they returned, Jen found an envelope laying where she sat addressed to the bride and groom. Inside was a cashier's bank draft made out to the two of them for $2 million with a note that said, "Follow your dreams." Jen saw it and started to bawl. My signature was on the draft. I slept in till almost noon on Sunday morning, having got to bed at about 6 a.m. After the wedding reception was over, Judy and Joanne had dragged me to an all-night Chinese restaurant for a midnight meal. Both girls wanted their first private time with their dad. Before we called it a night, we had exchanged phone numbers, current address, and my darling daughters had arranged to come and spend a couple of weeks with me back home. After a shave, and a shower, I had gotten dressed in my usual attire: blue jeans, a white t-shirt, with a blue jean long-sleeve shirt left unbuttoned hanging down the sides, with black socks and cheap Walmart running shoes. Brand names and high fashion did not impress me much. I felt the richest when dressed like this, driving my old Ford truck. I was just a simple man who lived a simple life. I came down the stairs to find a house full. Mom and Dad, Bill and Connie, the rest of their brood, all 7 of them, and my 2 daughters. Connie was telling my daughters how I had saved their marriage and had explained how for over 10 years all our friends had tried to figure out if I was straight or not. Your father, though not a religious man, had the patience of Job. He never gave any one of us a hassle when we would try to set him up. We were all totally stunned when Jen called him Dad because we had no clue. Till then, we thought the most important thing in his life was his 2 black female cats. After saying hello to all, I went to the kitchen to grab a coffee and to light up a smoke. Mom joined me, asking me what I wanted to eat, so I told her 6 pancakes, 3 soft eggs with runny yolks, and 4 slices of bacon. She was thrilled to death and started pulling out her pans. The cooking staff got out of her way. They knew she was cooking for her son. Dad came in as I sat there to catch me up with what was going on. It seemed the mass media was having a field day. Headline on the New York Times was "The Walking Dead is alive." CNN had been telling the story of my historic military record and had interviewed some that I had served with. Most of them said they were surprised that I had lived after being taken down. My dad had to laugh when one of them remarked, "The one thing you never said to Charlie was that it can't be done, because he would always find a way to do it." He seemed to enjoy getting his superiors pissed off. As a leader, he would only push his team as much as he pushed himself. Under his direction, we all became better men. It was out that Joan was married to 2 brothers, and with no record of a divorce, I had to have been one of the longest publicly known cucks. They said that Senator James Barnes had bought himself one expensive 304 when he crawled between her legs. I couldn't hide my smile. CNN had an afternoon special promoting that lifestyle. Feminists were cheering her, praising her for the lifestyle she had led, but even their comments were being condemned. A news crew had been sent to interview people in our little town. Most had nothing but good to say, but it was amazing how things got ratcheted up just for 5 minutes of fame. Dad laughed. "The media has blown this up and really made this a mess. The way they screw things up, by the time this is done, the country will think you're a saint, and you won't have even said a word. Both Joan and James are screwed." I got up and refilled my coffee just before Mom brought me my plate, then sat across from me watching me eat. She still was working up to the point that she could accept that the baby of the family had come home. "Dad," Joan said, "your brother is claiming he had no knowledge of what Mom had said to the judge because he had gone looking for you. Do you think that might be true?" "Who knows?" I replied. "We know that for 3 years she was doing him on the side behind my back. There is no way we as humans can remember everything we said or didn't say. They had to have discussed the consequences of being caught and what they would do if that had happened. Your mother felt secure enough in saying what she did that day. She was mentally prepared for what happened. Her own choice of words proves that. Either way, they expected the family would handle it. The 2 of them used us all." "Oh God," Joanne said. "You looked at it not in a personal way, but in the way it affected everyone in the circle around them. That paints a different picture." "So, who worked it all out, Mother or James?" "James has never been a leader. Even in the Marines, he played it safe. Your mother and I are both go-getters willing to take risks, so it had to be her," I replied. "Jennifer told me that your gift last night, if managed properly, would set them up for life." She would not tell me how much it was, but she asked me to tell you that they are investing it for 5 years because they don't want to be in a situation where they just flutter it away. Joanne said softly. Just so you know, the threads of what was done is just beginning to unravel. No one knows what will come in the end. You never know until it's revealed what people with money and power will do. On Saturday, your mother was served. It's time we got divorced. I said, your sister is being very wise. When your sister and you get married, you will get the same amount. When did she receive the papers? Joanne asked. The moment she left the church. James got served too. I'm suing him for alienation of affection. Either way, they're screwed. I got the family trust frozen because I am not dead. Everything in it will be dissected by the lawyers. If they put their own money in because of what was done, I may get theirs too. I said, James will have to pay a few million to settle the suit. Joanne looked at me without speaking for a moment, then said, shit, the house they're living in is owned by the trust. I think everything is. They may be screwed. It's a mess, that's for sure. I feel sorry for us all. Lawyers are going to end up taking a lot regardless. This was done to protect those who no longer need protecting. Sadly, it's always the innocent that get hurt. I said. Judy had been listening to the conversation. I could tell she had something on her mind, so when she asked me if she could talk to me privately, I was not surprised. With Dad's permission, we slipped into his office. Dad, Judy said, I've got a female friend whose ex-boyfriend has been abusive in the past. She's got court orders out against him, and he has been jailed a couple of times. He's set to be released again next week, and we're both afraid he's going to come after her again. She's a RN. I work with her, and we share an apartment. She has started an 8-week holiday and has some money in the bank. Mentally and emotionally, if it wasn't for her work, she would be a complete wreck. She needs to be in a spot where she feels safe and secure. I think she needs to get away. She was at the wedding last night, and for the first time in a long time, she showed a lot of interest in a man who she said walked tall and carried a small stick. Would it be okay if I introduced her to you? Of course it is. But you know we fly home tomorrow, so what are you really trying to get me to do? I asked. From what Joanne has told us about her 2 weeks with you, and what you both did, I want you to take her back home with you. It sounds like the perfect situation for her to be able to completely heal. Bill and Connie are great people, so I know she will fit right in. Judy said, if you won't do it for her, will you do it for me? She's that important to you. I said, so, who is the man she is interested in? Yes, she is. I see her almost like an older sister who should have been married to a good man long ago. The man she is interested in is you. She laughed. With your past, I know you can keep her safe. Darling daughter, are you trying to set me up? I laughed back. Remember, I've reached the age where I'm old. You can answer that for yourself. She'll be here in an hour, she said with a great big grin. Remember, Dad, age does not matter. The things a man will do for his daughters. Joan and I had married right after she got out of high school. Her father had introduced me to her when he was doing an overseas tour. I was in my second year, and she was 15. For me, it was love at first sight. I joined the Marines with my father's influence and permission at 16. It took to it like a fish in water and excelled. My drill sergeant said I was old before my time. Being mentally tough and determined allowed me to move up the chain faster. The only thing I found difficult was continuing my education while living in the barracks. Thankfully, schoolwork had always been easy for me. I graduated with my degree in 3 years instead of 5. I had 6 years in when the twins were born and got my first discharge when they were 2. I considered myself a young 44-year-old father. My dad always said I was an overachiever and was willing to finance my company, and away I went. Thanks to the age of computers, in 4 years, my brokerage company went North America wide. I was always traveling because of business. I must admit that I was too much hands-on. Dad and I were in the backyard shooting a few hoops when Judy came out with her friend. As we watched them walk towards us, I noticed Judy's girlfriend had long, natural blonde hair. Dad said she has a set of bums just like your mom. Good breeding stock, he said with a chuckle, and added, I love them when they're built for comfort and not for speed. I learned that Barbara Ellen Patterson was 33, had never been married, and grew up in a small town in Ohio. She was 5'9", which made 3 inches shorter than me. She had broad shoulders, a decent rack, and could play a damn good game of hoops. She and my dad made mincemeat out of Judy and me. After a couple of games, the ice had been broken and we began chatting like we were old friends. After talking for a few with her, I excused myself and went into my dad's office to make a few phone calls. I finally opened the door and yelled to Barbara and Judy to come in. I told Barbara that I had one of the directors of the local hospital where I lived on the line who wanted to talk to her. While she talked to him, Judy and I went out into the hall. "What's going on, Dad?" Judy asked. I replied, "She's being offered a full-time position in the emergency department starting in a month if her references check out, which based on what you've told me, I assume that they will. If she accepts, she can catch a ride with me when I fly home tomorrow and stay with me till she finds a place. It will be up to you to forward to her or get rid of anything she can't take with her. The pay won't be as high, but the cost of living is lower." Judy hugged me and gave me a great big kiss on the cheek. "Thanks, Dad. I knew you would come through. I had discussed this with Joanne, and she thought you would too. You have made it possible that she can finally put the past in the past. Thank you for setting her free." Barbara accepted the position. The change that came over her was amazing. Her true natural warmth and loving nature started coming out. It was joy for all of us to see. My dad, being a lawyer, drew up a power of attorney which would allow Judy to act on Barbara's behalf. I suggested to Barbara that she set up a new email account and text it to all that she wanted to keep in contact with, informing them that she would be sending them her new phone number via that, and she will let them know what's going on via the new email account that within a week. Barb, Judy, and Joanne were thrilled. They soon rushed out the door to help Barbara prepare to go. The plane took off at 4 and landed at port just before 8. Connie and Barbara bonded on the way. Bill and I talked about how impressed he was by my parents and my daughters. He advised me to be careful because Barb was the marring kind. The stock value on my former company was now at $103. Tomorrow morning, CNN would receive a couriered envelope containing my death certificate and the location of my grave. It was just after 9 p.m. when we arrived in Spuzum. I drove by the small hospital so Barbara could see it where she would be working before heading back out of town to my home. The farther we got away from the East Coast, the happier Barbara seemed to be. As I drove the truck up my driveway, I realized I needed to get a second vehicle. Spuzum's population was now about 3,000. It was evolving into a small tourist town. Seeing my home for the first time, she said I haven't been in a log home since I was a small child. Before taking her luggage, and we walked out on the front yard so she could get a view of how my home looked over the village below with the log mill, the boats in the docks, and how the view of the Pacific Ocean was unending. It was a postcard image, and she was in love with it.